Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Of course, my name is Alan Herrera, and I am the editorial supervisor for the Association of Foreign Correspondents in the United States. That is AFPC-USA. And today I'm pleased to give you another episode of our Foreign Correspondents Talk series, wherein I get to interview foreign correspondents about their lives and their careers and just their perspectives, right, about living and working here in the United States. And it's always very fun for me. And today I'm very pleased to announce that my guest today is Leila Sofia Medina. And she is an Ecuadorian multimedia journalist as well as a documentary filmmaker who is based in NYC. She has a strong background in video journalism. She holds a master's degree from the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism, and she has worked with leading media outlets, including CNN en Español, BBC News, as well as Business Insider. Her work focuses on migration, identity, and culture, and she has produced impactful stories across platforms in both English and Spanish. She is, and this is wonderful, she is about to join the New York Times as a video fellow, so congratulations to her. And she aspires to continue directing and editing stories that highlight the diverse communities in the city, especially the Latino and the queer community. So thank you, Sophia. It's so lovely to have you here with me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be talking with you today, and thank you for this opportunity and for highlighting journalists.
Of course, of course. As I said, I very much enjoy it. It is something I am passionate about, and I'm so pleased that our organization is such a strong and powerful force for foreign journalists. So thank you. Um, to kick off this conversation, tell me, Sophia, how did you know I want to enter documentary filmmaking? I want to be a journalist. Was there something in your childhood, perhaps? Was there a moment when you realized I like telling stories? You know, what brought you here to where
Yeah.
you are today? Yeah.
So it was mostly I started in fiction and I wanted to do filmmaking. I started working as a assistant production when I was 15. I was on sets in Ecuador, of course, and I assisted in my first movie when I was 15. And that's kind of how I gotten into the visual world, the world of, making films and video, and I really, really enjoyed it. And then when I was in college, I was given the chance to go to a boot camp in Atlanta with CNN, and I studied multimedia. I didn't study journalism when I was in undergrad. Um, but then when I saw, this world of journalism and how impactful these stories were, I was drawn to nonfiction more than fiction. And I produced also my first documentary there when I was in undergrad. It was like a short profile on someone that I knew, and it was really interesting. And I was shocked and kind of impressed that these stories, the people that we normally see daily, um that we might not think, have an extraordinary story. They actually do have, we all have these little extraordinary stories to tell. And I found that really powerful. And that's how I decided to pursue journalism, because I thought, these work can affect the community that I live in, whether that is Ecuador or now New York. Because the stories that we're telling are very important to highlight the issues that we are facing, that our communities are facing, and that we may not be listening to on our daily lives. So that's kind of how I ended up here. I first started with, my love for filmmaking, and then kind of found nonfiction on the way.
I think that that's great, especially it's really nice to hear that, especially as somebody who genuinely loves filmmaking of all kinds. I love cinema, and I especially have such an appreciation for documentary filmmaking. So thank you for sharing that. I'm curious, was there a specific documentary or specific ones that you saw that inspired you to move into this field?
Yes, there is one actually that really moved me, inspired me, and made me think, these are the stories that we need to tell. And I love fiction stories, but documentaries, I think, touch something that's completely different because they touch on reality and like the things that we are living. So it's a Mexican documentary. It's called Las Tres Muertes de Maricela Escobedo. It's, I believe, produced by Netflix, and that documentary completely like touched me and just changed my perspective, and it inspired me that those are the kind of stories that I want to tell, mainly because in Ecuador I come from a context that you know feminicides. So the topic of this story, it's about feminicides. A woman that was looking for her daughter basically tries to find justice in Mexico and ends up being murdered by the same people, or people that are related to her daughter's disappearance and murder. um and this reality was something that I was living or seeing every day in my context in Ecuador. When you turn on the news, you see these cases of gender violence and feminicide. When you're at school, you hear of your friends being threatened by their boyfriends or mistreated by their boyfriends. You see it in your own families, that is not really talked about. So I think those topics really like touch me, and that documentary, seeing how powerful it was and the impact that it also had in Mexico for this case was incredible. And I realized too, documentaries are not only the stories that we tell, but they can actually create change in our societies. And that's kind of what we need, especially with topics that are so sensitive as these ones, and especially in the context of Latin America. I think these stories are so necessary because, yes, we see them every day in the news, but when you put in a documentary, when you make it, you go more deep into them, you can actually like highlight them more and make them more visible and actually get to like people in power that can make some change or that need to be held accountable.
Again, I think that that's a very good point, especially because domestic violence, abuse of women, of all kinds, femicide, all these things are such they are a massive issue the world over, to the point where, where the United Nations even has a day to acknowledge, gender-based violence. So I applaud you, for spotlighting those stories. And it it's clear to me, right, that you are, of course, you yourself are a woman, and there is this personal connection that you feel because in the grand scheme of things, and it's just a fact, you are you are more vulnerable, more than your male counterparts. So I wonder, is there perhaps a desire, something that comes to mind here, is there perhaps a desire to use documentary filmmaking as an avenue to help create an environment of safety for other women out there?
For sure. I think in the work that I've done, whether it's long form or short form, or even just written stories, I think that I always try to keep that in mind, to have it be a safe environment for the people that I'm interviewing and for the people that I talk to, and also to gain their trust, because I feel like, they're sharing your story, their story with you. And I think that I've taken those elements from, like, I don't know, studying filmmaking and directing. I think kind of it is kind of directing when you're interviewing someone, or when you're making a documentary, you're the director. So you have to like you control the narrative kind of in a way, but you also have to make sure that, it's not your story to tell. It's not your life. It's not the things didn't happen to you, so you have to be really careful about how you shape that. And in the stories that I've worked on, especially like in my documentary, I think that I want to highlight um the people that, haven't been highlighted before, maybe, or that may need more of a platform. Like you mentioned in my bio, like I think my community, which I'm part of, the Latino community, but also the queer community, and to have them share their story in a way that it's, safe, that I can make sure that they feel comfortable sharing what they want to share, and that they not do not feel pressure to share anything else. um I think that's important.
I think that what you've just said about, I think that you're making a valuable point about a certain degree of sensitivity that's necessary, especially when you're dealing with marginalized communities, talking about very personal things that oftentimes very scarring things, psychologically traumatic things. And I think all journalists who are listening to us today should keep that in mind. There are certain best practices that they should follow. What would you say is, Sophia, what would you say is the most important thing, I suppose, that an interviewer should keep in mind when working with subjects, whether with marginalized communities in the situation that you've just described, or just people in general? Like, what is it that you've learned along the way?
Hmm. I think, well, I think it depends on who you interview, because when you're interviewing like someone in power, it's going to be completely different from when you're interviewing someone in the street.
Of
um
course.
because they're at a different disadvantage and at a different position in their lives. But I feel like for most interviews, like especially in like whatever community with people, that you see every day, I think it's first compassion and really have the ability to listen, um, and to be open to that information that they're telling you. Um, but I think for me, yeah, it's like the ability to really listen that matters as a journalist. Not just to write your story, but to see what's also behind that story that you are, pitching or that you're working on. Um, I think also becoming a safe space for them. I think that's an important part of being a journalist. Whichever story that you're telling, you want the person that you're interviewing to feel comfortable with you, and to feel like they can share whatever they're saying with you, um, and that you are going to take that information and that you're going to use it in a way that's fair. So I think also having, values like ethics, and having um the truth at in front of, any other, um like, how to say it.
Do you mean keeping the truth at the forefront of this
Yeah,
work?
keeping the truth at the forefront. um I would say being objective, but I think that objectivity, at the end of the day, um it's not, we learn objectivity so much in journalism school, but it's like at the end of the day, what is objectivity?
Yes.
It's a complicated term to define. But yeah, I think, yeah, always keeping, being receptive, listening, and making sure that you are taking what they're giving you, fact checking it, of course, but also like um sharing it the way they're telling you, like making sure that their story is accurate and that you're being fair.
No, absolutely. I think that that's so important, and it gets back to what we've been discussing about trust, because also, I mean, so much about so much about journalism is impacted by, how do I put this? Journalists need to be credible, and reputation is very much everything. So if you're not sensitive or understanding or following best practices with interview guests of any sort, but certainly those who you've worked with and who you've enjoyed working with, right? These people from marginalized communities and telling their very important stories. If you don't, if you don't take all of these factors into account, then what business would they have, trusting you again, or let's say passing your name along to other people so they can share their stories? It compromises your work
Mm-hmm.
ultimately.
Right. And also, I think it's important to like point out, we are journalists and our name is going to be in a byline or in the credits if it's a video or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's not about us. Like, that's not the point. The point is not getting our names out there. The point is that, and I was at an event recently and I remember one of the speakers said this, and it was, journalists are basically just like the channel from, where that person tells me their story and I tell that to the world, um or to my platform, however, or yeah, however big it is. But like, it's not about me, it's about the people that are going through that at that moment. So keeping that in mind, I think it's important. And yeah.
I think that channeling is it's a very good word, actually. I really
Mhm.
do like that. Yeah. That is, it's crucial, it's crucial. And also when journalists, and this has been my experience, and it's also been the experiences that I've noticed, right? That other journalists have had, the journalists who I've spoken to on this program, right? They've shared with me so many fascinating insights from their lives and their careers, but they all have a certain commitment to making sure that they stand by the people who they speak to, that they stand by their sources, that that they respect them, that they care for them. You do need that. That is necessary, and I think that we certainly are living in a climate where so many people have lost faith, right, in media. And we have, for example, local news organizations that have been closing, left and right. And as a result, there is this vacuum. And it needs to be, something needs to be put in place to fill it, because otherwise you end up with people who continue to feel misrepresented as well as unrepresented,
Mhm.
above all. And it's so difficult. And I thank you for speaking about that. Um,
Yeah. And
yeah.
I can add like one more thing. I think also, like, talking about documentary, um and I recently like graduated from Newmark, and I think one of the lessons in the documentary program, it was that sometimes journalism can be very extractive, and you go in there because you're caught up in the daily news, you have to go in there, you get their story, you're like, what happened, whatever it is, wrote that down, you're on to the next story. But one of the things that I like about documentary is that the word care is very important in documentary, because you have to care for your participants. They're not just sources, they're not just someone that you go and talk to one day, you film them and you're out. You get to like see more of these people for a longer time in documentary. You get to,
Mhm.
really like know their background, know their story, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything.
Yes.
And you have to care for them still. Like, you have to, you know, represent them accurately, whether it's good, whether it's bad, but you have to care for them. Um, so it's something that I think that's why I like long form documentary. Like, that's why I like long form stories, because it's less extractive than just going there and just, you know, asking them a couple of questions and then leaving.
Yes. Yeah. I think that in the situations that you're describing, I think that journalists, they learn that when you're engaging with people over such a long period of time, that there is a privilege, right? It's a privilege to be able to hear these people's stories. And it is such a privilege. And it's been an honor in many cases that, that I look back on, right? When people have been willing to say, Alan, I like you, I trust you, I'm okay with
Mhm.
sharing this with you. And that has absolutely, meant the world to me. And I'm sure that it fills you with joy as hard as the work can be sometimes, isn't it a nice feeling when you know I'm doing the right thing here and they like me and we can just keep moving forward? Because I mean, journalism is hard enough as it is, right?
Yeah.
This is not an easy job.
No, not at all. Not at all. So having like cultivating sources and cultivating the relationships with people, I think it's important. Both the people that you work with, but also the people that you are telling you their information, their stories. Um, because yeah, at the end of the day, you're helping each other.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'd like to pivot for just one second. Um, can you tell me, um, what was it like when you first arrived, in the United States? Was there this had you been to the US before? Was there was there, I imagine that there was, but an excitement to just, hit the ground running, go to school, get out there and work? What was it like for you to go from this environment in Ecuador that you described? What was it like coming here, and what have your impressions been of life in the United States as you've navigated it?
Right. Yeah, there was definitely excitement. I arrived here like almost 2 years ago. I had been here before just visiting, but I had not like lived here or been here for a long period of time. So I would say it was a nice like shock or culture shock because mainly because I am in New York. So it's a mix of so many cultures, so many identities, so many people, and getting to being immersed in all of that and getting to see, all these different things and try new things. And as a journalist, also being able to have the opportunity to interview all sorts of people. It was really, really exciting. And something that I still do not take for granted. I think being a journalist here in New York, it's an exciting experience. Um, and I would say it was a good surprise, Also seeing how different journalism is done here. I was working in Ecuador for CNN and I was, working um producing stories in Ecuador but also producing stories for US Hispanic audience. So it was also US stories, but like being here and actually getting to share with that community, interviewing them in person and not just through Zoom, it was completely different because you actually got to understand, their struggles or their needs or like what is affecting them here, which is completely different from like what's affecting us in Latin America.
Hmm.
Like yes, we come from the same place, but we like the people that live here have completely different concerns than the people that are living in Latin America. Um, and the people living in Latin America sometimes may not see, the struggles that, the community has here either. So it's like having to understand that making journalism here it's completely different than it was back home.
Again, I think that that's a very good point, and you really touch on the importance of bridging the gap, right? Of bridging the gap between one culture and the next, right? And that's so important. And I think that certainly being in another country is such an educational experience. I have no doubt that it's been such an educational experience for you. And that how do I put this? That experience, that educational experience, and at least, this has been my experience. I loved being in school. However, there's so much that you learn when you're just living your life and observing the people around you. So has it been fun for you above all?
Yeah, for sure. It's been like so many new experiences. Like I think New York, it's a very unique place in that. Like beyond work, beyond everything, like you get to learn so many things. And I think that the things that you learn and the people that you meet, like that's where you kind of get your stories from at the end of the day. Because, it's like, I think when I'm thinking about a story, when I'm doing journalism, it's like, why do I find this interesting? Or why do I find, oh, why did that happen? Or why is my friend, worried about that? Like, I think that's fun, and that's like what makes it so exciting, because it's like you're talking about your daily life, you're reporting about your daily life, about things that impact you. And yeah, New York, it's like a never-ending pool of stories.
It is. It is, as someone born and raised in New York City, it's impossible to be bored in New York City.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, it's impossible to be bored, whether you're a journalist, whether you're in any field, right? It's fascinating. And
Yeah,
yeah,
sorry to cut you off. Like,
no, no, no,
you
by all
get
means.
to meet people from all walks of life. You get to meet so many interesting people, and I think that's one of the biggest difference from being back home. Like, maybe I was not exposed to like as many like personalities or identities as I am exposed here, and that's wonderful because it opens your mind so much.
It does. And in my experience, I mean, I feel like it builds a certain empathy, right? Empathy is so important. It's so valuable. And that's why, and again, for anybody listening, going out there and speaking to people develops empathy. Reading stories, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, right? It is impossible not to be touched by the human capacity to feel, you know, without engaging in that way. And I think another point that I would like to touch on here is, can you can you tell me, since we're on the topic of of fun, right? What is the most fun story that you've worked on, whether it was whether it was in Ecuador, whether it's here? Like, what have you enjoyed?
Mm, hard question. It's
It
been
is.
a lot of fun stories. I think I have fun with every story. And I really enjoy telling like um cultural stories. I think those are the most fun for me. And like, for example, back in Ecuador, I told um there's this group of theater that does like historical theater. So they take you around the city and they take you like on walks, on tours, but they are dressed as historical characters throughout the city center, and they like try to regain or recover our traditions, our culture, and to explain it to also foreigners. So I think that was one of the most fun stories that I worked on in Ecuador. And then here I worked on my documentary for school, and I worked with a drag performer in Astoria, Kazan, and that was I've I filmed for a year and a half, maybe a year, and like getting to see that journey and that transformation of him as an artist, it's been really, really fun, but also really inspiring, I think.
It is, and full disclosure for anybody who's listening, I consider Hassan a friend. He is a very wonderful, very talented performer,
Yeah,
as Sophia has pointed out, and perhaps your documentary about his journey as a performer will end up before many more eyes, which would be very exciting.
I hope so.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And it goes back to empathy, right? And how it's just an opportunity for people to really engage with a different subculture, right? There's a different subculture. And it is, I would say that, from my observation, it's so important to engage in culture and subculture, especially when we are living through a very politically turbulent time. And as we navigate this politically turbulent time, I think that it becomes even more imperative, right, to develop the capacity for empathy and love for our fellow human beings. Because when we acknowledge their stories, we enjoy telling them, right?
Mhm.
Sharing them with the world.
And I think also like it goes back to whether you're a journalist or not, listening. I think being open to listening and being receptive to um that information that the other person is giving you, I think we lack so much of that nowadays, and that's why everything has been so divisive, because we see each other as, others. So it's like if I come from another country, someone is going to see me as a threat because, I'm foreign, or I'm not from here, or I'm not, part of their culture. But I think, and especially working in this documentary, what has taught me, it's like there is so much more that we have in common that what divides us. And if we care to meet these people, to listen to people, whether it's, I don't know, someone living in Ecuador, or someone from a rural area in Kansas, or someone that does, performs in drag, like, we all have something in common, and we are all human at the end of the day, and we all, want the same things. We all want, to be happy, to be stable, to live in a world that, it's good to us. So, and yeah, and for the people around us to be safe. So I think listening and making sure that we see stories that are not, maybe that not pertain to us, or that from people that do not look like us, is important, because we're going to learn so much, and we're going to have, empathy, and maybe see ourselves in those people.
I think that this is a really great note to end on. I think that you have just made some really wonderful points, and I think that our audience of foreign correspondents can take away so much from your thoughts. The word of the day, everybody, appears to be empathy and listening, and I hope that all of you who've tuned in today have enjoyed listening to Leila Sofia Medina and her journey. So thank you. Thank you so much for being here with me today. It's been great.
Thank you so much, Alan. It was a pleasure.